Collier's unit was on the line for honor flight status at graduation. While morale and church attendance were important in the evaluation, scores for marching and target practice were also important, and a demonstration of marching would be included in the graduation exercises. One of the recruits would have to guard the empty barracks during the graduation exercises, and a vote was taken to determine who that would be. I won that honor hands down. My buddies knew that if Gomer marched before that brass, he'd get nervous and mess up. Collier agreed. So on graduation day, with my mother attending the ceremony, I secured our barracks, not an auspicious task, but practical under the circumstances. When Collier returned, bearing the certificate of honor, he reminded me, "We couldn't have done it without you, Gomer." He cleared his throat and grinned. "And we couldn't have done it with you either." Well, that's that, I thought. I've made it through flight training. The rest of the way should be a breeze. And I signed up to join the Air Force. I did so with the understanding that I would be going to chaplain school to become a chaplain's assistant. Finally, I could get on with what was really important to me. Knowing the military's ability to get things mixed up, I checked with the assignment officer to be certain I was cleared for entrance into the chaplain training program. The officer assured me that my worries were unnecessary. I had been assigned to the chaplaincy program. My fears were put to rest until the bus that was supposed to take me to my new quarters stopped in front of the Air Force Police Academy. My first thought upon reading the sign was, "Oh no, what am I doing here? I can't become a military cop." I took a deep breath. "Calm down, Johnson. You're getting excited for nothing. For all you know, the chaplaincy school might be held on the same grounds." I climbed off the bus with the other flight training graduates and fell in line. The mid-afternoon Texas sun beat down on us and reflected off the pavement, making standing at attention uncomfortable. A training instructor strutted toward us. He announced that we'd be issued our M16 rifles by Social Security number. He barked out the numbers one at a time. My heart jackhammered against my rib cage as, one after another, the men took their possessions of their weapons. There's been a mistake, a terrible mistake. Lord, I can't shoot straight, and I can't march, remember? The sergeant read my number. "I won't panic. I won't panic," I thought as I stepped forward. There has to be a simple explanation somewhere. He dropped the rifle into my hands, and I stared in horror at the frightening contraption. The only gun I'd ever touched was my friend's Jackie's BB gun, and all we ever did was shoot a squirrel and miss. "Sir?" I said. "Yes, Airman Johnson. There must be some mistake. I don't need a gun. Where's my Bible?" I shoved the rifle back into the startled instructor's hands. "Your Bible?" His voice scaled 2 octaves. I could hear snickers coming from some of my flight training buddies. I also heard Gomer, the hated nickname circulating through the ranks. "Your Bible?" the sergeant repeated. "That's right, sir. I enlisted to train at the chaplaincy school, not at the police academy. So you see, I don't need a gun, I need a Bible." "Uh-huh." The sergeant stared unwavering into my eyes. His gray-green eyes narrowed to pinpoints. After eyeing me for several seconds, he heaved a sigh, mumbled something about military intelligence, wiped the beads of sweat from his brow, then shouted, "At ease, men! According to my orders, Johnson, you are right where you're supposed to be, at the police academy." "No offense, sir, but my recruiting officer assured me that I would be placed in the training program, sir." The sergeant shook his head and scratched his chin. With deliberate steps, he strode across the roadway to where one of the other sergeants stood. They conferred for several minutes. A second and third instructor joined them. The longer they talked, the more nervous I became. The heat from the sun intensified. I could feel the frustrated glances being sent my way from the other airmen. Finally, the sergeant returned. He shoved the M16 into my hands. Just take the rifle, Johnson. We'll straighten out the paperwork later. Yes, sir. I swallowed hard and wrapped my fingers around the stock of the gun as I might a rattlesnake. The sergeant handed out the rest of the weapons to the other cadets, then dismissed us to our assigned barracks. I started in the direction indicated when I heard my name being called. I saw Jeff, a friend from flight training, running toward me. Johnson, you still causing pain and conniptions for the TIs? Guess so, I shrugged. Obviously, I can't stay in the police academy. There's some mistake. You know the military, they'll get it cleared up in time for you to draw your old age pension. Thanks. I felt the weight of the rifle against my shoulder. I would hate to kill anyone. Don't worry, Johnson, Jeff assured me. The military will work it out. Somehow my friend's assurance did nothing to reassure me. I had seen too many military snafus since joining the Air Force to be consoled by such a promise. I'd barely unpacked my bags when I was called to the administration building. Ah, maybe, I thought, I can get this thing worked out right away. Found the appropriate office and told the sergeant on duty about the mix-up. I explained to him all the reasons that police academy was the worst possible assignment for me. So you see, police academy would be the last place I would want to be. I am useless to the Air Force. I understand, Airman Johnson. The tech studied my file, then added, You have an excellent recommendation from your training instructor. He nibbled on his lower lip for several seconds, then looked up from the file. Why don't you stay 1 week while I do some checking? By then, maybe we can get you shipped off to the right place. I thanked him and returned to my barracks, certain all was right with my world. From the two previous chapters, a person may think that by refusing to quit, by canning the cants and the labels, life then becomes wrinkle-free. Not so. The only constant in life is change, and not all changes go according to one's wishes or desires. But God does promise that all things work together for good for those who love God. And he also says, Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the earth. Police Academy seemed like the end of the earth for a wannabe chaplain who couldn't shoot straight and marched as if his shoelaces were tied together. My first day on the firing range with my M16 rifle, I watched several other cadets step up to the platform and fire at a distant bullseye. Looks easy, I thought, trying to bolster my flagging courage. Simple, in fact. The weapons instructor, informally dubbed Redcap, waved me forward. I stepped onto the platform and leveled the rifle at my shoulder. The stock of the rifle grew sticky from the sweat in the palms of my hands. My hand continued to shake, no matter how tightly I clutched the weapon. Tiny rivulets of perspiration trickled down from my forehead and into my view. I wiped them away and aimed the weapon a second time. This particular firing exercise was a qualifying heat for the M16 rifle, the first of many weapons I needed to master before completing my training in the police academy. I reminded myself that what happened out here on the firing range didn't really matter, since I was only putting in time until my new orders came through. Fire, Johnson, the red cap ordered. I held my breath and squeezed the trigger. The weapon kicked against my shoulder. Slowly, I lowered the rifle. One step at a time, I reminded myself. At the end of the heat, the red cap tallied each man's score, then announced, "Something has happened that has never happened before, at least not since I've been at the police academy. Today, one in our group not only did not make enough points to qualify, but he never hit the target." A sick feeling rose from my stomach. I had no doubt he was speaking of me. "I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to move the target closer and allow Airman Johnson to try again." Heat flooded my neck and face. I could hear my fellow cadets, both friends and foes, chuckling. The nickname Gomer Pyle surfaced once more. The last thing I wanted was another opportunity to mess up before my peers. If only I had the promised transfer out of the unit to the chaplain training program. Up and down the firing range, people stopped to watch me try a second time. Taking a deep breath, I placed the rifle to my shoulder, leveled the barrel, fired a second round of bullets, then waited for the results. The red cap returned, shaking his head. "I can't understand it. No one has ever missed the target that badly. Do it again, Johnson." The weapons trainer moved the target several feet forward. Then I tried a third time and failed again to connect with the target. "Sorry, son," the red cap informed me, "but you'll have to go to casual." No, I thought, not casual. My heart sank. This was the threat every flight instructor held over the heads of his men. For an airman in training, going casual was a kiss of death. Nothing could be more humiliating. It meant falling back a week while your friends moved on to the second phase of training. An airman going casual became a marked man. He was required to untuck his shirt and wear a special hat to distinguish him from the other cadets. Officers and airmen alike jeered at the hapless casual as they passed. This procedure was meant to be embarrassing, as most of the casuals were there because of goofing off or getting into trouble. I still hadn't learned that God has a purpose in everything. I was so focused on myself that I wanted to create my own perfect ending to every situation. I couldn't believe this could be happening to me. I would spend the week doing odd jobs, painting, raking leaves, emptying garbage cans. Then I would begin the training program again with a new group of cadets. As I weeded the flower bed in front of the mess hall one morning, in the blistering Texas heat, I grew angry, angry at God. Here I was, trying to do what He wanted me to do, and see how things ended up. I jammed the trowel into the sandy soil and extracted a weed by the roots. How could He let me down like this in front of my friends? How could He humiliate me like this? Hadn't I remained cheerful and optimistic through flight training in the face of extreme adversity? Going casual? First, a mix up, not even of my doing, had landed me in police academy, and now I had to go casual. I felt as if I'd been detoured from my goals. God owed me better than this. I was so humiliated. Could I ever recover? Would I ever get to where I wanted to go? I yanked a dandelion weed from the sun-baked earth. For some reason, for some crazy reason, the weed reminded me of Peter, a friend of my family who'd been on welfare for 22 years. He and his four children lived on $600 a month. About the same time that he started attending the Sharon Seventh-day Adventist Church, he had received a letter from the state welfare department saying he was being cut from the welfare program. He panicked and thought his life was over. He asked my mother, "Why would the Lord let this happen to me?" She replied, "Let's pray that God is allowing this to happen for a purpose." The purpose soon became evident when Peter got a job washing buses. Later, he advanced to driving for the company, with a salary more than double my current salary. I wondered, is it possible that God could have a reason for allowing me to go casual, as he had with Peter? How could such a detour work into his plan for me? I knew about detours. Born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, I traveled many of Oregon's secondary highways after bad rock or mudslides had closed the main roads. Travelers would be directed onto alternative routes, often driving several miles out of their way before rejoining their original road. Would going casual turn out to be a temporary detour, or would it become a dead end? To make matters worse, at the end of the week, I returned to the administration building to discover that all the openings in the chaplain training program had been filled. If I wanted to stay in the Air Force, it was Police Academy for me. Devastated, I called home. Once again, my mother encouraged me to give God time. He would work things out. The next morning, I talked with the base chaplain. He affirmed my mother's advice. He said, Terry, I don't believe you are here by accident or because of a paper glitch. While God's plan didn't always match our plan, they will come out right if you give them a chance. On my way back to my barracks, I fought with God. He won. All right, Lord, I'll stay in the military until you direct me otherwise. But I don't understand any of this, and I don't like it. Somehow, the I don't like it made me feel a little better. I do what God wanted, but I do it kicking and screaming all the way. The next week, the Red Cap worked with me until I could connect with the target. I got so that I could occasionally hit one of the outer rings of the bullseye. Airman Johnson, he said after I had made a particularly good score, I see something in you that the Air Force needs. So I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to let you go ahead. He scribbled something on my score sheet. You're only a few points away, Johnson. You're dismissed. Off casual. I could hardly believe it. Now I could join the newest flight of police cadets. All was right with my world once again. All was right until the first day back on the shooting range. Having confidence in my ability to shoot the weapon, the Red Cap commanded me to demonstrate for the new men how the M60 worked. The moment I stepped onto the shooting platform, I knew I was in trouble. All my old phobias returned. My throat tightened with fear. Just squeeze off 3 or 4 shots so the men can get used to the sound of the M60 makes, he ordered. Once, just once. I love to execute an order without making a fool of myself, I thought as I slipped the earphones over my ears and leveled the rifle against my shoulder. But what that was not to be. At least not on this day. When my finger pressed the trigger, I froze. Open machine gun fire splattered across the firing range. I'd emptied the entire magazine. The barrel of my rifle glowed campfire red. Unnerved by what I'd done, I stood helplessly facing the redcap as he struggled to his feet. Shaking, the training instructor stammered, you're all dismissed for today. Before I reached the mess hall for lunch, the news of Gomer's latest screw-up had spread throughout the entire police academy. Discouraged but determined, I practiced until I qualified for the M60, the M16, and the M203 grenade launcher, as well as for the 38 pistol. At the end of my training, I received a ribbon for marksmanship. However, even my ribbon couldn't erase the image of the goofy Gomer from my reputation. Yet I knew the truth. God showed me that what may have looked like a detour was really an opportunity to put me on the road to a miracle. During my last week of my police academy training, my friend Jeff told me about the tryouts for the President's Honor Guard. I was wondering, he said, if you'd go with me to the tryouts. Just come with me for moral support. I don't expect you to try out. Wow. Everyone at the police academy knew the importance of an assignment with the President's Honor Guard. And as good a cadet as Jeff might be, what chance did he really have of making it? Only generals' kids and military school graduates stood a chance. I was excited just to know someone who wanted to try out for the Guard. The President's Honor Guard was a dream for an Air Force cadet. Less than 3% of the Air Force military ever got a chance to see the Honor Guard in action, let alone be a member of it. The lucky cadets who had served in the President's Honor Guard had a ticket to go anywhere in the military. I had no intention of applying for the Guard. Why add fuel for my Gomer fame by doing something stupid like that? So I wasn't prepared when I arrived at the academy recreation room where the honor guard tryouts were being held, and the sergeant, passing out application forms, insisted I fill out an application as well. If you're here, airman, you gotta apply, he ordered. I waved my hands in denial. No, I can't. If you're here, you gotta apply, he repeated. I threw up a quick glance to Jeff. He grinned, unnerved. His grin unnerved me. Go ahead, Johnson. What will it hurt to fill out the application? It's not as if you're seriously applying, right? I rolled my eyes heavenward, then shrugged. Oh well, I thought. Fill out the application. There are more than 850 cadets applying. How can it hurt? Neither Jeff nor I were ready for the announcement at the end of the day. I'd made the first cut, and he hadn't. The sergeant told us that my qualifying had something to do with a certain look the honor guard wanted. On the way back to our barracks, Jeff complained about his bad luck. I guess I can blame this one on my parents, not having the right look and all. We laughed. Imagine them choosing you for your look. Wait until they really see you in action. The news of my making the first cut of 400 out of 850 men traveled through the barracks. At dinner, I took a lot of teasing about Gomer and the President's Honor Guard. I laughed along. It wasn't easy being the company clown, no matter how much I slothed him off. The possibility that I had survived the first cut seemed ridiculous to me as well. Forget it, I told myself. What are the chances that I'll make all the cuts down to the magic 12 that will actually make the guard? I sat through hour after boring hour of the recruitment process. At the end of the second day, I was surprised to find myself still in the running. At dinner, my buddies hee-hawed more about Gomer being in the President's Honor Guard. Since no one had asked me to demonstrate my marching abilities, I knew it was only a matter of time before I would be axed. On the positive side, I couldn't pull KP duty while participating in the tryouts. The last time I found myself on breakfast preparation, I'd pulled a Major Gomer. Before dawn, I'd stumbled to the mess hall and to help prepare breakfast for the pararescue trainees, the toughest unit in the Air Force. These men trained hard, fought hard, and played hard. Compared to them, all the men in the other branches of service were pansies. My job was to load a 50-gallon plastic milk container into the milk dispenser. As I placed the fresh milk container in the machine, the pararescuer trainees arrived, hungry as wolves. They'd been out on maneuvers for more than 3 hours already that morning. I hurried to the line up the milk spots in the proper slots, then closed the dispenser door, or at least I thought I closed it. As I headed back to the kitchen, shouts, curses, and laughters exploded behind me. A heavy hand suddenly grasped my shoulder. "You'd better do something about that, Airman," a deep voice said. "Huh?" I glanced up at the towering pararescuer behind me, then in the direction of his gaze. The dispenser had sprung open. Milk spewed out in every direction, showering several startled airmen. The men gyrated about, trying to escape the sprays of milk, while onlookers shouted and laughed at the spectacle. "Oh, dear God, no!" I paled. "Here, let me help you." The stranger leaped into the shower of milk. I followed. Together we wrestled the errant container into submission, then latched the door. "Oh, dear God," I muttered a second time as I looked at the devastation. "How could this happen?" "Hey, it's okay," the stranger assured me. Grabbing a mop procured by one of the men on KP duty, I grabbed another. "Did you mean what you said?" I scowled at my rescuer. "What did I say?" "Were you really praying?" "Absolutely. You should only know the half of it." "You really believe in a God who loves you and looks out for you?" "Sure, don't you?" The man cast me a crooked grin. "I did once." By the time we finished sopping up the milk, the stranger had become a friend. We arranged to meet later to spend time getting to know each other. I couldn't believe it. God had used one of my dumb mistakes to bring me into contact with one of his sons who'd somehow detoured from the way he knew to be right. Could God do the same for me with this honor guard application, I wondered? But I dared not dream. In spite of the teasing about the impossibility of Gomer making the honor guard, deep inside my heart, I began to wish with, that such a miracle could be possible. Talk about reaching for the stars. I laughed at my audacity. On Wednesday, I had a personal interview with one of the recruiters. At the end of the interview, the recruiter scribbled down something on my folder, attached my photo to the folder, and handed it to the sergeants seated beside him. "You're dismissed, Airman Johnson, until tomorrow at 900 hours." I walked out of the building into the sunshine. I couldn't believe it. I was still in the running. That night I could hear Mrs. Pennyworth's voice in my dreams. "You're a dummy, a troublemaker. You can't do it. You're wasting your time." I woke long before the sun, more tired than I'd been before going to sleep the previous night. Before breakfast, I took a few minutes to read a verse from Psalm 50. "Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and I will honor you." Suddenly, I realized I'd been worried about bringing honor to Terry when I should have been more concerned about bringing honor to my Heavenly Father. "Sorry, Father," I prayed. "Today, no matter what happens, I will honor you." On Thursday, there were only 40 men left of the original 850. We would be interviewed by the Honor Guard Recruitment Committee. Before going in, we were each given a slip of paper containing a list of commands to execute upon entering the interview room. My heart pounded as I read over the commands. Left face, right face, about face, and the list went on. This is it, I thought. My friend's predictions would finally be realized. Gomer would now wash out. The interview room was like a video segment out of my worst nightmare, and my interview could have won grand prize on America's Funniest Home Videos. A 9-person committee, all wearing more brass than I had ever seen gathered in one place, sat behind a long table. Each of the high ranking, sober faced Air Force personnel held a clipboard and a pen. I'd never been so terrified in my life. Mrs. Pennyworth's scolding face flashed before me. Her words rang in my head. Dummy! Dummy! Spots danced before my eyes. My lips and tongue grew numb. I wondered if I could be having a stroke or something. I glanced about the room. I feel my heart pounding from my toes to my scalp. I knew I was supposed to say or do something before I sat down, but I had no idea what. As I stood wondering what to do, the committee members glanced at me, then at one another. The captain in charge finally spoke. Sit down, Airman Johnson, and tell us about yourself. I stumbled to the straight back wooden chair centered in front of the long table. It felt good to have something solid for support. One after another, committee members asked me questions about myself. After their question, they ran the length of the table a second time. The captain asked, Is there anything you want to say or do, Airman Johnson? Say or do? I blinked. I just wanted to get out of there. No, sir, I snapped. Are you sure? I shot a glance at the row of stone faces behind the table. No, sir, I mean, yes, sir. The captain cleared his throat. A slight grin teased the corners of his lips. You're dismissed, airman. It wasn't until I stood to my feet that I remembered the routine I was supposed to have performed when I entered the room. Maybe I could still rescue my sinking military career, I thought. Okay, just do the routine and get out of here. First salute, right? What happened next must have made the honor guard's list of all-time incredible bloopers and blunders. I stood at attention and snapped off a salute with the wrong hand. Seeing the almost imperceptible quirking grins on several of the officers' faces, I peered up at my offending hand and realized I'd made a mistake. To rectify my error, I snapped off a salute with the other hand, hearing a snicker or two. I thought maybe I'd been right the first time, so I snapped off another left-handed salute. I peered up at the hand touching my forehead. Oh no, wrong hand. You salute with your right hand. I switched hands immediately to a ripple of polite laughter. A few more chuckles, and I was completely confused, all the while trying unsuccessfully to calm my frenzied nerves. Realizing that my salute was beyond repair, I hurried onto the sequence hands. Left face, right face, about face, left face. Like a whirling dervish out of control. I turned first one way, then another, then back again, to the raucous laughter of the interviewing committee, until I lost all sense of direction and they lost all sense of military decorum. Tears streamed down the officers' faces. Doubled over with laughter, they pounded the tabletop. One officer leaned against the wall, his head buried in his arms and his shoulders shaking convulsively. The officer in charge looked as if he'd topple off from his chair onto the floor. Another gasped for breath. Aghast at what I'd done, I stopped short. I figured that the committee members were laughing too hard to see anything I might do, right or wrong. Every fiber of my body shouted, Run! Run! In barely more than a whisper, I said, Excuse me for wasting your time. Blinded with humiliation, I saluted properly, then headed for the exit. An attractive female honor guard opened the door for me. Too mortified to think rationally, I whispered something stupid, such as, Do you think I have a chance? The woman stared at me in horror, then shrieked with laughter. Yours has to be the worst interview I've ever seen. You messed up completely. everything. I could hear their laughter after the door closed behind me. In all my years of embarrassment and censure, I'd never felt so hopeless and idiotic. Mrs. Pennyworth was right. I pounded my fist into the palm of my other hand. I'm a dummy. Instead of going to the mess hall for supper, I jogged down one of the base's seldom used roads. How could I face my friends after such a fiasco? As I saw it, the detour I'd taken from my goal to become a chaplain's assistant was turning out to be a painful final dead end to all my military dreams. My emotions told me I was a loser, but my intellect reminded me that the embarrassment I felt at this moment would fade with time. What really mattered was that I not quit, that I not give up on myself for God. While I might be at the end of my rope, I needed to tie a knot and hold on.